Have you ever wanted to get into pressure fermentation, but really couldn't justify the cost of expensive stainless steel fermenters? If so, I have some options for you to consider, so stick around. Hello everyone and welcome back. Larry here again to talk about pressure fermentation on the cheap. So as you may have seen, I've over the years have done some pressure fermentation videos, right? Different types, different styles. Originally I had the Fermentosaurus, then I went on to the FermZilla, and then on to the SpikeFlex Plus. And now I have a couple more options at my fingertips. So off to my left, your right is the, let me get this right, the FermZilla All Rounder 30 liter, all right? And on my right, your left, is the Fermenter King 35 liter Snub Nose Generation 3. So I happen to have both of these in my possession, and I've used them both. And I thought you might be interested in doing a little side-by-side comparison here, rather than doing separate videos, one for each. Since I have them both concurrently and I've used them both concurrently, it just sort of made sense to do a single video showing the pros and cons of each of them. But first, a little disclosure here. The FermZilla All Rounder I purchased myself last summer with my own money. And the Fermenter King Snub Nose actually was provided to me by Keg King directly via Blickman Engineering, who is their US distributor here in the US. So thanks to Blickman and Keg King. I was originally going to do separate videos, right, for each of these, like I would normally do for a per product video and get 2 videos out of this. But really, and quite frankly, I thought after seeing a number of existing YouTube videos already on either one of these 2 fermenters already out there, there's a ton of them out there, I didn't want to have yet another Fermentosaurus or FermZilla video or yet another Snub Nose video out there. And given the fact that I recently used both of these concurrently for a batch of beer for an American lager recipe that I had just recently posted a video on already, I thought it would be a good chance to do a little side-by-side overview of both at the same time in one video to save you time and to give you some pros and cons of each of these in case you're trying to decide if you're trying to get one or the other. Hopefully my feedback will help you make an educated decision. I've used the All Rounder 3 times already since last fall or last summer when I first purchased it. So I got a bit of experience with this. The Snub Nose I've only used once, and that was just very recently since I only got it recently. But I think I got enough experience with it to give you a my fair opinion and review of its pros and cons, as well as that of the FermZilla All Rounder. So first, what they have in common? Well, they're both PET plastic. They're both pressure fermenters. They both have floating dip tubes with the little float balls to suspend the intake tubes just below the surface level of the beer. They come with stands, ball locks, check valves, and stickers for volume and temperature on the outside of each vessel. And they're both what I would call bucket style fermenters, meaning they don't have any dump valves or tube valves or jars underneath them. Now that's a personal preference that I actually prefer these type of fermenters. I actually have used a number of dump valve, tube jar type fermenters over the years, and honestly, I was not really impressed with any of them. I mean, they were okay, but it didn't suit my brewing style. I had no need for them, right? I didn't harvest yeast, and I didn't care about the tube, honestly. I never had a problem with it. Plus, those dump type ones were kind of a pain to clean. In order to get completely clean and to disassemble them and sanitize them and the like. So I've kind of decided for myself, I like the bucket style fermenters, and both of these are of that style. And that's what they have in common. Let's go over the differences. Well, at first glance, you can see there's a little bit of a geometry difference here, right? On the FermZilla All Rounder, it's got a rounded bottom on it. Right, so it sits on a stand, like as you can see here, and the Snub Nose is made with a little snub cone type bottom. It fits in its own upright stand here. With the FermZilla All Rounder with the round bottom, it has a wider surface area above the tube, if that matters to you. Tube contact with the wort, if that's a thing and you're concerned about. The Snub Nose, because of its cone shape, has a smaller cross-sectional or surface area between the tube and the wort. So if that's something that you're considering, definitely the Snub Nose has got the advantage there. Also, because of the geometry of the bottoms being different, from my experience, I've noticed that the dead space losses, which is the beer and the wort left behind in the fermenter, is actually greater in the FermZilla All Rounder than it is on the Fermenter King Snub Nose. I think it's the geometry of the cone and the way the floating dip tube work together. I actually had a lower dead space loss with the Snub Nose than I did with the All Rounder. But to be fair, if you account for this in your recipe design and account for the extra loss, does it really matter to you? But one thing that did bother me personally with the All Rounder with the round bottom is that it rolls over easy. So not really cool when you're trying to rack from it or fill it up or do anything with it, or just have it sit empty and you can't keep it upright. It's okay now, but you give it a bump and it'll roll on you. So something to be aware of. Whereas the Snub Nose, it's got this nice frame, this big stand with a frame that keeps it inside and upright at all times. So if that's something that's going to worry you, maybe the Snub Nose might be for you. And speaking of the stands, since the All Rounder has got the smaller stand here for it, and you can place it on there and fill up your beer, to transport it, you either need to carry it in two pieces or try to carry it as one, which is really kind of clumsy. But on the upside, they do sell a harness accessory that you can buy that's strapped around this thing and allows you to carry both of these together as a set. Over here on the Snub Nose, the stand is well built. It keeps it upright at all times, and it's relatively easy to carry if you can grab around this little rim up here. Now, it does come with some handles down on the bottom here, which I'm not sure how to use them. I tried carrying this full with the handles, and it was really kind of top heavy and lopsided. Trying to lower this onto a surface, the handles would kind of get in the way. You have to wiggle the handles out of the way to get it to sit flat when you go to lower it again. So I didn't find the handles on the bottom useful in any way whatsoever for myself. In fact, I actually might remove them. But the upside of this is that if you can get your fingers around the frame and you can carry this whole thing without any fear of it tipping over or having to buy a harness accessory. Now, there's some features that the Snub Nose has that the All Rounder does not. Now, first thing you might notice if you look at the device, that there is a thermo well going right down through the center of this thing. And that thermo well can be used for you to insert a thermometer probe down the length of the thing, so you can get a mean measurement or an average measurement of the actual inside volume of the beer or the wort while it's fermenting, which is much more accurate than the little stickers on the front that give you just the surface temperature of the which is, don't want to get into the science of heat transfer and all, but putting the temperature sticker on the outside is not indicative and not realistic to what the actual temperature deep inside the volume is. So you can use it as a guide, but is it accurate? No. If you want a better temperature reading, an option with the thermo well would definitely be a lot better. Now, me personally, I didn't have any device that could use that would fit down the thermo well. I have a couple ink birds around here, but those probes are too fat and thick to fit down that thermo well. So the one time I did use it, I had to use the stickers anyway. And really, I'm not the kind of guy who's a big stickler on temperature anyway. My basement where I ferment everything in here, both of these together, is roughly the same temperature all the time. So I'm not really all that concerned. But if it is a concern for you, it's something to take into account, right? And another thing that the Snub Nose has that the All Rounder doesn't is a dry hop port at the very top. So at the very top of here, there's a little valve where the check valve sits actually, and that actually unscrews. And if you have hop pellets in a little hop bag, like you would get from a store or anything, you would just drop them in there through that port and not have to remove the entire lid and have to put it all back together again in order to dry hop. Now, the downside to that, obviously, is that whole leaf hops aren't going to fit down there very easily. So this really limits you to the use of hop pellets, but it is an option that it offers that the All Rounder does not. Something that I noticed having fermented in both of these over time is with the floating dip tubes on the FermZilla All Rounder, the floating dip tube just meanders around the liquid and sometimes brushes up against the sidewalls. And sometimes as the work gets down, as you're racking out of there, that float moves over to the sidewall, and since it hangs lower than the float ball, it can start scooping up some of that trube that's clinging along to the edge of the wall, and that transfers into your keg, your bottles, or whatever, right? So what I actually didn't appreciate at first, but I do now, is that with the Snub Nose, they actually have the floating dip tube kind of keyed to the thermo well in the middle of this thing. So as the liquid level lowers or rises, whatever, but as it lowers, it actually keeps that intake tube right in the center of the fermenter, without a chance of it getting near the sidewall to pick up any unwanted trube during racking. Another key difference I realized after having used both of these is, as you might notice, that the lid sizes are different, right? So you have the Snub Nose with a smaller opening at the top, smaller lid. It makes it really hard to get a big fat sausage hand like mine in there to like wipe the inside of the walls clean, because you get the little beer stone and the tube stuck to the sidewalls. The only way to really take care of that in here is to soak it and shake it and hope it comes out on its own, or you get some kind of device in there. Like I actually had to use my Carboy cleaning rod and drill to get in there and wipe the inside of the walls, right? That's how that is. So not the greatest thing, especially if you have big hands. With the FermZilla All Rounder with its larger diameter lid, I had no problem reaching inside this thing to wipe up the walls with a damp cloth and get all that stuff off of there. So for ease of cleaning, I actually have to give the slight advantage to the All Rounder. Both of these vessels allowed me to pressure ferment my beers just fine. I mean, I have not had a bad batch come out of either one of these. They're both fine fermenters. It's just a matter of what's right for you. May not be right for what's right for me, but they're very similar. If you're trying to decide which one you want to go with, really it boils down to whether you might want to not pay for the extra accessory for the harness to hold this together to transport it from room to room like I have to do. If that's not a factor for you, maybe you like the idea of the thermo well going down in here so you can measure the core temperature of the fermenter, if that kind of thing is important to you as well. But for me, I like them both. I, in fact, will continue to use them both. As you know, I do 10-gallon batches nowadays, and I split them between two smaller fermenters. So just like I did with my last batch, my American lager recipe, I use these for that, and I will use these two again going forward in a rotation, right? I have other pressure vessels here and other fermenters that I like to use. I don't always pressure ferment all the time. I only do it for certain beer styles or for certain other reasons. Don't always do it. I have a whole collection of glass carboys that I still use today. And if you're new at this, you don't need a pressure fermenter to make beer. You can do it in a carboy, or if you use a stainless steel keg, you can actually ferment in those, although at a smaller capacity. So really, but if you want to keep your kegs for holding the finished beer, you don't like glass carboys, you don't want to spend the money on stainless steel equivalent fermenters, and you're a little tight on a budget, I would suggest you get one of these two. They don't have the tube jars in the bottom, which actually adds a little price complexity and the hassles of cleaning and keeping them sanitized. So if I was to recommend a plastic fermenter, I would suggest you to use one of these with whichever options that are more important to you personally. And those are my thoughts on these fermenters. I hope you found something useful in this video. If you like it, give me that thumbs up, will you? And if you're a new viewer and not yet a subscriber, consider subscribing. I do home brewing and cooking on my channel, and I really am passionate about both. So if you appreciate one or both of those topics, hit that subscribe button. I much appreciate it, all right? If you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. I'll try to answer them. And for everyone else, you all take it easy. I'll talk to you all later.